Welcome back, everyone. So in today's video, we're finally designing the dashboard or the home screen. In our previous video, we were able to persist our users login and making sure that we show the onboarding screen once and not the second time whenever they try to open the app. So we are able to also write our global store with Zustand to manage all our states. We are going to be adding more to this as we progress in this tutorial. So right now, we need to design the home screen. This video is going to be a little bit fast, as I'm just going to be making use of copy and paste for the designs. We already know how to design using Tailwind CSS, so I won't be boring you guys with typing all the codes, so that this video will not take so much time. So as you can see, this is what we ultimately will be aiming for, and we need to design this and then get the information and data dynamically. So first of all, we need to design this dashboard. So let's start from our home screen. The first thing we need to do is to design it. Like I said, we'll be making use of copy and paste. All right. So first of all, the background should be primary, width and height should be full. Then you save everything. So we are going to be removing this. So just as from the design, the first thing we need here is the greetings. We need to import icons first of all. We need to import icons from constant. Okay, so we have done that. Okay, so this is the first design that we have, which is the, should I call it nav bar, which is at the upper side or the upper part of this home screen, which is the good morning, and then summer, the icon and the rest of it. Okay, so our project just crashed. We need to import image also. So we need to import image. All right, let's save again and see. Okay, so now we have it. Good morning. We are going to be passing these informations dynamically later on, just as the name. We'll be getting the name from our user or the user that signs in. But right now, I want us to finish up with the design before we start adding our data dynamically. Okay, so the second one is under this view, which is just right above our safe area view. We need to have a scroll view. Which we also need to import from ReactNative. Remember, we need to import it from ReactNative. All right, so right now let's add a little bit of attribute to it. Okay, so the first one is show vertical scroll indicator, right? Okay, so we're gonna set that to false. And the second one also is content container style, or content container style. Yes. Okay, so we're going to be adding a few styles. Like I mentioned before, we can't just come here and do our class name, which we normally do. Like I said, I mentioned this in some of our previous video. I think that should be in a second or third video from this tutorial, that we can't use this class name to just add style with our Tailwind CSS. Though some of the styles work, but there are some styles that will be overridden that you can't have inside this scroll view. You just need to type them inside this content container style. And I mentioned that before, so we'll be making use of this content container style, and we have to add our min width. So our min width here should be 100%, and then we have comma and align items also, so we make it center. And the last one is justify content. We also make it center. Okay, so now everything that will be in this scroll view will be inside, will be centered. So the reason why we need this scroll view and we did not add it, we not add this one inside the scroll view, is because we want this one to be like the navigation bar or the status bar, something like that. So everything else that will be inside the scroll view will be scrollable. Okay, so everything that will be inside the scroll view will be scrollable. So that is exactly what we are doing here. So our first style, which is I think the total balance. Okay, so I'll just be saving so that you guys can see. As I do any copy and paste, I'll save, and then you see what we're talking about. Okay, the next one is let's just have another view, and then the view, we should just have class name of, let's have our width to be full, our padding of 3, and then inside of it we're gonna have okay, let me explain. Let me first of all import the touch opacity, which is our button, and then our link, which is coming from Expo router. Remember, the link is coming from Expo router and not React Native navigation or whatsoever. Okay, so and then also our touch opacity, which is our button. So let me explain this a bit. Okay, so inside of this view is where we have okay, I haven't written our balance yet, so our balance should basically just be a text, and then inside of this text we just have, for instance, $1,000, and give it a class or styling of let's call this text. In fact, let me just copy the style I have here already. Okay, so this is it, and then let's save and see. Okay, so right now, as you can see, here is our balance, which is $1,000. Okay, so I think it started to look a little bit like what we have in our Figma design, as you can see. So let's continue. Okay, like I said, the second view inside of our scroll view, remember this is inside of our scroll view, we have the header or the status bar, and then we have the balance portion. So I just call this balance area, where we have, you know, all the necessary stylings, the amount, and then we have a container or a view that is housing the two buttons, which is the transfer and the receive button. So this transfer button, whenever it's clicked, will be taken to a transfer screen, which is basically this second screen here, which is called transfer. We'll be creating that later on, but for now, just write the code like this. So this is how we have it here. Okay, so and then the second one is the receive, which is touch opacity, and then the style that comes with it. So we're just using, you know, flex box, which is flex row, justify between and a tray gap, margin top of 1, and then we place the two buttons inside them with their corresponding stylings. Okay, so as you can see here we have it. So the next one should be a quick link, which is this quick link here. I called it quick link, so we need to have that also. So how are we going to do that? Let's first of all create this, because we can't just have all that inside of the home screen. So inside of our component, let's create the JSX called quick link.jsx. Okay, so and run our snippet rfc. All right, so inside of the quick link, we're going to be having 4 elements inside of it. So first of all, in fact, let me get the code. So the first thing that we need to do, change this to view, right, and then import everything. We need to have view, we need to have the text, and then we need to have our image to avoid any error, and also we need to have import router, or should be inside of import router, which is coming from Expo router. It's coming from Expo router, and also our icons, just in case. Icons, which is coming from /assets/const. Okay, /constant. Okay, no, constant. Okay, all right. You should be quick link. Let me rename it here. Refactor. You should be quick, and then do refactor. Okay. All right, so the first thing we need to do here is inside of our first view, we should have width of full, margin top of 1, and padding of 3. Okay, so we need to have our first text, which says quick view, and then we won't be adding this icon, we'll be adding this one later on, the icon beside it, which is the add icon. So we are going to just have this quick link text and then the components under it. All right, so let's come over here. All right, so we need to have first view. So this view is basically where we'll be having all of our 4 components, or 4 tabs, or link, whatever you call it. Okay, so, and class name, which will have flex of row and margin top of 3. Okay, so inside of it, we're gonna have 4 links or 4 buttons. Okay, so 1. So now let's import everything, which is our touch opacity, our button, and then our icon, which is coming from phone icon. I don't think we have this icon. Let me check. Okay, so I think I have added the icon. Don't worry, I will have everything in the GitHub repository, so you guys can just copy the constant and the asset and the constant and replace with whatever you have, so that you can also have my updated icons. All right, so let's continue. We have the first, let's see. Okay, so we have the first link, so we need to do this again. The first link, we can just copy this 2 times. For instance, let's paste this here. So the second one is called, let's see, second one is called, okay, electricity. So instead of airtime, let's call this electricity, and then the icon should be changed to dot. I think it should be lamp or bulb. Okay, light bulb. Okay, so that's that. And the unpress, let's just remove the unpress. We don't need them now. This is just to navigate to various screen based on what you click. So right now we don't need them. Okay, so I think we still have more. Let's continue. Let's copy and then paste again. So the third one is, sorry, data. So let's run data, and then the icon should be, is it data, or let's see, what is the name? Wi-Fi, is it? Okay, Wi-Fi icon, I think. Okay, so let's do that again. And the last one is others, I think is others. And what's the icon here? The icon should be data, or I really cannot tell. Let's check. So I think it should be menu. All right, so let's save everything. Okay, so I think our code crashed. Let's just reload our emulator so that we can have the changes. All right, so while we are waiting for the emulator to reload, we need to pass this quick link to the home screen. So let's do that. Below here, so below, just above the scroll view, let's call it quick link. Then we need to import it. All right, so we need to import it from quick link from components. All right, so you can see it there. All right, so I think we should be able to see it right now if once our emulator has reloaded. All right, so after reloading, as you can see, we have the design here, which is quick link, and then they all have the same color. I think we should change that. So the first one, which is actually the one with the purple color, and the second one, as the second link, I think the color should be 00EB97. right, so I think we should be having that. The third one should be, FF4EF8. Okay, and then the last one should be, I think, dark blue, which is 0A2463. Okay, all right, so I think we have something that looks similar. Okay, so I think we have something that looks similar here. Now let's continue with this banner or advert. I call it advert banner. All right, so this advert banner, for right now we won't, it's just going to be only one, but later on we'll be adding, we'll have a kind of a slide or an automatically or an auto slide shoe or a carousel, or I don't know how we call it. I don't know how we call it using it's a carousel or auto slide shoe for it. Okay, so where do we start? We first of all, just below, remember it's still going to be inside our scroll view, so below our scroll view we can even call it, let's have a kind of a comment and call it banner, and then this is the start of it. So let's just call it banner. Oh, why is it not working? Okay, that's it. So banner, and then banner start, banner end, so that we'll now place the banner inside of here, the banner style inside of here. And as always, I'm just going to be pasting this and then I'll explain later on. So inside of it, okay, so this is the banner. Okay, so let me just save it. So as you can see, okay, there is an error image. I thought we imported, okay, the image is actually the image that is coming from the banner itself, which is this image here. This image here, which is the image down here, this image here. So I think we need to import that. So first of all, we just have to call the image, import the image beside the icon. Okay, so beside, if you're wondering where this is coming from, it's coming from our constant. Remember our constant, we have inside our constant we have icons and images, where we are using the index to export all of them, and inside this icon, that is where we have all our imported icons. The same goes for the image, where we have all our images here that we're going to be using. So let's continue down here. Let me remove all this. All right, so inside the home we need to import that and then save the code, and let's see. Okay, so right now we have the banner here. In the future we'll show an advert here, but whenever the user opens this app for the first time, or whenever they register for the first time, we need to show them this so that they can complete their verifications. Remember, this is a mobile banking app. We need to verify a user, like KYC, know your customer. So we need to be able to do that. So we need to ask the user to provide some relevant information, such as their ID card, you know, driver's license, address, country, states, because remember from our registration screen we don't have some of those informations there yet. So for the user to start making good use of this mobile banking, they have to provide us with those information. So whenever user clicks on this, complete your verification, your account verification, they'll be taken to their profile, where they will have to fill out some more informations, and we'll collect those data and then verify them. So which means this next time after they have been verified, we no longer have to be showing this. Rather, we'll show any kind of advert from, you know, from the company or the owner of this mobile banking application. So we can just design our own, you know, banner and then start showing it here, maybe slideshow, like I explained previously. So that's what we're going to be doing here. But for this purpose, for this video right now, for this tutorial, we're just going to be leaving it as this, because we haven't implemented or designed how to navigate the user where they will be able to sign or complete their verification yet. So let's just leave it like this and continue below it. So the last one we have here, I think, let's check, is okay, the transaction. And this is actually where the phone starts. We need to have a transaction screen, or a transaction log, sorry. So this transaction log is where a user will be able to see the kind of whatever transaction that they have made, you know, whether be it receive or send, or whatever transaction, whether mobile airtime, sending money to anyone. They'll be able to see the log. They'll be able to have the day, the date, the time, even the category. Remember, even the category, and then the amount. And then this see all, we are going to have a page where if they click this see all, they'll be taken to a list, like a table for all the transactions that they have made. You know, we can partition that for maybe show about maybe 50 transactions per screen, or 20 or 10. So we have to design all that. But right now, let's design it and see how it looks like. So we need to call this one, let's come here and say, let's call it transaction log. All right, so transaction log starts. So let me comment it, transaction log starts, transaction log end. So in between here, we're going to be having our transaction design here. And how are we going to do it? So let me first of all start by having a view, so which will class name, let me just copy the design. Okay, all right, and then the next thing we're going to be having is the text, the header, or whatever that you call it, which is the transaction and the CO. So let's save. Okay, as you can see, we have it, which is transaction, and then the CO. The CO, whenever we click it, remember it's a link. As you can see, we have it as a link, and then the link, the href, is taking us to a transaction page which we haven't created yet. So if I click it, you will have an error of no routes found. So right now, let's continue by, remember, we are going to create this transactions log later on. So let's continue. The next thing we need to have here is a button. We need to have a button. Now this button is actually where we have all the transaction information. Each transaction will be inside of a button because we want to make this transaction clickable. This is what I'm talking about. We want to make this stuff clickable. This transaction, we want to make it clickable so that whenever a user clicks it, they will be taken to that transaction information, like the full details, transaction details of that particular one that they have clicked. So that's why we have to enclose it with a button. I don't want to use a link. I would have done it with a link, by just changing this to a link. And then, but I prefer the button because it gives us a kind of a feedback. As you can see right here, if I click this, you will be having a kind of a feedback, the touchable opacity, you are having it so that you know that this is clickable. That's why I don't want to use the link. Not that it's not, but you can use the link if you want, but in this tutorial, I'm making use of just this button, which is touchable opacities. Okay, so now let me just explain a little bit what we are doing here. Let me close down this. Let me expand and then close here so that you guys can understand and see this very well. Okay, so here we have our button, which will be representing our transaction log. Okay, so like I said, this transaction, remember, we have received here. So we have the first text here, which says received from Anoma Thomas. We can just make this Advent Suma, or if you want, Advent, okay, let's call it Advent Suma. Okay, so or however you want to spell that. Let's see, are we spelling it right? The name here, okay, Advent, it has an R there. Okay, so we have the received from Advent Suma, and then I have the plus. I have below here, I have the subtext here, which states the date. Remember, I'm typing all these things statically. We are going to be providing these informations dynamically from our database, from the informations in that user's database. Remember, because each user will have their own transaction history, transaction log. So we're going to be displaying that transaction log based on that user's information or that user's data. Okay, so right now we have the subtext, which is the date, the time, and the category, because when we're making transfers, we'll provide the user where they can select the kind of category or payment they want to do, or whatever that they want to use the money for, like a kind of a description or something. Okay, which category, why are you sending this money? Is it for fuel? Is it for food? Is it for rent? So stuff like that. So we'll be providing this inside of this application. And then after that, we now have the text for the amount for the exact amount for that transaction. So if the transaction, if someone sent, $5,000, they'll be able to see the $5,000. Say if they send 2,000, 3,000, however. So we are putting all this inside of a view, and normally I can just duplicate this. For instance, let me duplicate this. Okay, so let me duplicate this, change the name. Let me change the amount. Let me call this 3,200. And then the text, this one should be minus, it should be transfer, not receive. So let me change the text from green to red. Okay, so now instead of adding Suma, let me add my own name here. Say it Tom Brown. Anoma. So okay, now we can also change the category. Let's call this one rent. Let's call this rent. And what else do we need to change? Okay, let's save and see how it looks like. Okay, we need to change the icon. The icon shouldn't be receive but sent icon. So the icon, okay, I think we even have the, okay, we have the icon as received icon, so it should be sent. Okay, let's save and see. All right, so we have the icon as send. So if you are sending, you have the icon facing the right side, and then if you are receiving, you have the icon pointing down right. Okay, so as you can see, this is actually how we are going to design this. I know it doesn't look much like what we have here, but I think I prefer this because whenever you make a transfer, you should have it as minus, which is red, and whenever you have, you know, a credit alert, you should have that as green, which is input, which is the plus sign that you are seeing here. So this, I think, is a little bit more intuitive and more descriptive as well, so compared to what we have here. But I think basically they are all the same thing. So let's continue. So I can still duplicate this more. The more I duplicate this, the more I have more transaction logs. But in real life, or in this tutorial, we're not going to be duplicating this like this, because remember, we are collecting this data dynamically. All right, so if you can imagine, if I have 100 transaction list, transaction log, I wouldn't have to come and duplicate this 100 times, remember. So I would just have to do this once and then collect the informations and then loop through it using map or for loop, or for each loop, whatever loop that we're going to use to always loop through the user's database and then get all these informations. That's what we are going to be doing in this video. All right, so for that, let's undo all this and just leave only one transaction. So I think having just one would do, because we're just going to be looping through it right now. All right, so we need to start passing some of these informations that we have, just like the amount. Remember, in our database we have the amount. Let's see how much are we. Okay, we have the amount as 1000. Okay, so let's check. Let's first of all start adding it. So let's scroll up. Remember, we have our global store, which we are importing from our global store that we created in our previous video. So we have that, and then we are passing this information, which is the user's data. So this user data is what we are going to be using for this. So we have the name. So all we have to do here is remove this and then call it user data dot, or let's have the chain dot first name, then give a little bit space, and then do the same user data dot, sorry, I think okay, this should have a kind of I can basically put it inside of a backtick, or just do it like this by having plus, concatenating it with just plus and then giving a space here. So I think I can do it like this, and then user dot last name. Okay, now that is the name, and also the amount. Let's first of all save and see if we are having it. So the name has to change to the name we have here for us to know that it's working. And then the name we have here, okay, we have the exact Tom Brown and Oma. Okay, so let's see if you change it, whether it's going to take effect. So let me change this. Let me just change this to edit. Instead of Tom, let me put it Tom Deva, and then click update. Okay, now let's see if we are going to have the effects here. Remember, it will take time sometimes, but we should have it there. Maybe whenever I resave the app, we should have it there. All right. Okay, let's continue with the amount also. As long as we're not having any error, I think we should have. Okay, it has changed now. I think my emulator is just slow on my network, so you can see we have Tom Deva and Oma here. So which means we are now getting the user's name, the user's full name, and no longer being passed statically, as you can see here. So we are now passing it dynamically from our database. And then also the amount, we need to also do the same thing inside here. Let's call it user data dot account balance. I think it's called account balance. Remember, you have to always call this the name, okay, account balance, the name that is being called inside of the database. Remember this account balance, it is called account balance. So make sure that you copy it, because that's what we are referencing to avoid having any error. So we make sure that we are passing the correct name there so that we can get the actual value. So let's click save. Okay, as you can see, we already have it as 1000, and now we have removed our dollar sign, so we can just add the dollar sign here. And then we need to convert this. Remember, we are not having that. We need to convert it to like in our previous 1000, we had the comma after the 1 and then before the 3 zeros. So we need to also do that by saying account balance dot to local string. Okay, local string. That is actually what we need to do. So let me show you guys. Okay, so we convert this, we add this to local string so that we can have the comma here which separates the after every 3 zeros. So if I have like 10,000 here, I'm gonna have, let me just edit this. For instance, let me edit database here, and then this amount, let me just say, instead of, okay, let's just make 5 or 50,000 and then save. So we're gonna be having the comma after the first 2 digits. We're gonna have the comma there. So let's update and then view our code again. It's gonna take effect. All right, so we have it as $50,000 right now. Okay, so it means that our information is being passed dynamically right now. Okay, so what next are we passing dynamically? Okay, now we need to also change the greetings. We need to make the greetings to also be dynamic. So if someone opens the app during the morning time, they're going to be greeted good morning. If they open it during the afternoon time, they're going to be greeted good afternoon. And if they're opening it in the night, so on and so forth. So we need to do that. Let's create the function. We're going to create a function that does this. So first of all, let's call it greetings, or let's call it get greetings, because it's getting the greetings based on the time of day. So now we need to create this function. Okay, so this function we're going to have, let's call const date equals to new date. Okay, so now get const as, which is equal to new date dot get as. Okay, so remember these are all JavaScript method. Okay, get our new date, they're all JavaScript method. It's get as. Okay, so now if we need to check the time of the day. So if as, remember, if as is less than 12, that means we are still in morning. We are still in the morning time. So we have to just do return good morning. Okay, so else if as is less than 16, so we are just using the military conversion. So 16 means 4 from 1, till that's from 4 before 4 p.m. That is 16 is actually 4 o'clock in military time. So which means 13 becomes 15 becomes 3, 14 becomes 2, and 13 becomes 1. So which means 1 o'clock, and anything less than that, which means it's now less than 12, that is now morning. So anything above this till 4 is still afternoon, as long as it is not above 4 o'clock yet. So if that is so, let me refactor this code a little. Okay, so if that is so, we have to do return good afternoon. Let's make it capital letter, and then the same goes for if as, okay, anything other than that, I no longer have to check for any if, because we're not checking for anything again. If it's not morning and it's not afternoon, so which means it has to be evening now, right? So let's just do return good evening. So if it is not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not this. So that's actually what we are checking here. So now let's save our code and see. And we have an error. What is the error saying? We have an error. It says function cannot be used as a constructor. Why do we have that error? All right, let me check why we are having this error, and then I'll come back to you guys. Okay, so I think I know where the error is coming from. We don't have to have this new keyword here. It has to be data. I had to change the function to a JavaScript modern function to C, but I think the error was coming from the new that we added here. So I think if we save our code right now, we shouldn't be having that. And now, as you can see, the time right here now is above 4 p.m. So that's why we are having the good evening right here. So if we make any adjustment, for instance, if we say it's greater than, in fact, let's make this equal to, which is not true. So we should be having, okay, if equal to, you should be having the good afternoon, which is not true, but let's make it greater than, let's make it greater than 4. So I think we should be having the good afternoon instead of the good evening. So let's save and see. Let's save and see. But basically, I guess you guys understand what I'm talking about here. We are able to, create a function that gets the time of the day and then greets the user accordingly and respectively. Understand? So, and the next thing we have to do now is our transaction history. We need to pass them dynamically. Understand? So, and I was thinking we should make use of flat list here, since it's going to be a kind of a data that we are going to be mapping through. But I think we're just going to be using our old map function in our normal React web-based kind of way. So we'll be doing that because we need to map through the user's transaction. As you can see right now, the user's transaction, there is nothing inside of the user's transaction yet. As you can see, there is nothing here right now. We have the transactions, which is an array, but the array right now is empty. So in the future, when the user makes any transaction, like I mentioned before, they will have that transaction log saved right here. And then whenever they open the app, this transaction log our code will look through the user's data and check if they have any kind of transaction log history. And if they do, it's going to display it down here, just as we have it here. And if they don't, we're going to display a kind of empty icon that says no transaction yet or no transaction made yet, something like that. So I think that is what we will be doing right now, because we already have every other thing being passed dynamically, like the greetings, the name, the account balance, and stuff like that. In the future, we're also going to be, this eye icon here, we're going to be making it in a way that whenever a user clicks it, we'll be able to hide the account balance. But right now, let's leave it for now. And also the bell icon, which we're going to be having our notification for the user, and then our QR code scanner right here also. So we're going to be implementing all this stuff. Remember, I said this is a full mobile banking application. So we're going to have all these stuffs implemented here, just as you have it in your regular mobile banking app. So we need to have that. First of all, let's undo this stuff. I don't know why it was supposed to be greeting me good evening. Anyway, let's just reverse it. I guess you guys already understand what I'm talking about here. So now we need to implement the transaction log. Okay, so how are we going to do that? We need to first of all mock the transaction log. We need to mock it so that we'll be able to call it just as it will be, or it will appear from Firebase cloud storage. So we need to do just that. So first of all, let's head over here, create a folder in our project and call it lib. And then inside this lib, we have to create a file and call it transaction data.jss. Okay, so inside of here, we need to export const and then call it transaction. I just call it transaction log, and it's going to be an array of objects. So the first object, we're going to have transaction ID. Let me just call it like this, and then let's call it 1. The second one will be transaction type, which we're going to have, let's call this receive. Okay, so the first thing we need here is the transaction ID, but remember we are just mocking this, and then the transaction type. What kind of transaction? Because this log will have several transaction types, such as the airtime. Maybe someone makes airtime purchase, or you transfer airtime to somebody, we need to also record that. And if you make a transfer, we need to also record it. And if you receive money from anybody, we need to also record all those. And then we are saving this inside transaction type. All right, so let's continue. We need to get some other thing again, which is called phone, which is the phone number. So let's let me just write +233 800, okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Let me just use any random number, and it has to be inside of a string. So it has to be inside of a string. And then the next one is account number. Okay, so account number, which also is just this number right here. So let's paste that. And then the next one is the name. Okay, so the name, let's see here, Adensoma, but we'll be getting all this stuff from our database. So right now let's add category. So category, let's say this one will be food, this one will be food, and another one is okay, the date time. Let's call it date time. So we need to create the time that this transaction was carried. So let me just copy a random date that I've already created and then paste here. Okay, so the next one is the amount. So the amount, whatever amount that you are transferring, let's just call it 1,400. The amount is actually an integer, so we are not putting it inside of any string. All right, so the next one is the bank name. This will come in handy later on. I know right now we are not using it, but it will come in handy. Bank name. So the bank name, we're just gonna save it as FIFD. Okay, so I think these are the information that we'll be needing right now for just this transaction log history. We'll be making use of this transaction log history very much in this tutorial, because we also have some other thing like inside of this Figma. Okay, it's gonna take a little bit time to load. We're going to make use of it inside of a recent transaction, you know, beneficiaries and stuff like that. All right, so now let's duplicate this, because I don't want us to have only one transaction log. So let's duplicate this and then call this one transaction ID should be number 2. So this one should now be transfer. Let's make the transaction type to be transfer, and let's also change the number. Let me just get, and then paste this here and then call it. Okay, so the name also have to change. Let me change Tom Brown. Okay, now the category should now be rent, and then the date, let me just change this to 0909. Okay, and then the time 09, or let me just make it 08:30. Instead of AM, let's make it PM. And then the amount here, let's have 2,500. Okay, all right, let's copy this once more. Let's duplicate it once more. You need to always add your command there. Okay, so this will be transaction type of 3, and then the number, let me just use the number 707064676627, and then do the same thing here. Remove the first 10 digits and then paste it there. Okay, so the name, we can just call this whatever we like. Let's say Deva and Brown here. Okay, so now this should be, let's say, school fees, and then change the time also. This should be 11:45 p.m. or AM. Let's make it AM. Okay, so transaction type should be 200, and then the transaction type here should be airtime. So now we have completed the types of transaction that we'll be having here: airtime, receive, or transfer. So these are the transactions that we'll be logging right here for now. So I think we have it right now. So let's head back to our home. So our home, we need to import that. So let's import transaction log. Okay, you can see transaction log coming from /lead/transaction data. Okay, so let's try and log this out. By saying transaction log dot for each just say item. For each item, sorry, remove the p there. Okay, console.log, and then call this item. So now let's check our okay, as you can see, we are getting it logged out right here, so it means that it is working. So I don't know why we're having that error, but I think as long as we are having our output is working. Okay, so let's continue. Now we need to pass this down inside of this transaction history down here. So let's head down first. I need to comment this out so that we won't have it running, or just leave it like that anyway. So let's head down. All right, so before we continue, there are a few things that we need to adhere here. Remember, we need to first of all check. This is transaction log starts here. So we need to check for something very important, which is when the transaction log is empty, because if a user creates this account for the first time, they won't have anything inside the transaction history. So it's going to be empty, just as it is right now. So as you can see right now, inside of our data, our Firestore, the transaction is empty. It's an empty array. As you can see it right here, it's an empty array. So we need to be able to display something that tells the user that they don't have anything or any information in their transaction history. So for that, we need to display an empty icon or something of that nature. But first of all, we need to get this information directly from our mocked API that we just created, our mock transaction data. Okay, so first of all, let's start by typing curly braces. Remember, this is inside of our transaction log. Just follow along here. Sorry, shouldn't be above it. It should be after the header first, which is the transaction, and the CO should be below, just above the touchable opacity. Okay, so we should have the curly braces and then call it transaction log. So transaction log dot length. So if the length is equal to 0, that means the transaction, there is nothing inside the transaction history, which means it is empty. Okay, so if it is so, we have to pass in a design. Let me just copy it right here and then explain. Okay, don't mind the app crashing. Okay, so we have to copy this, which says this is actually, let me call the icons.empty. Okay, so this is a view that we are rendering here to show that we don't have anything, and then I call it no transaction history. So inside this view, I just have my starting of width 100, view width, flex row, item center gap to justify center, to just place it in the center of this transaction log. Okay, so we also have the image, which has our icon, and I called it empty. So you can see it here, icons.empty, and then we have a text that tells the user no transaction history. So if this is true, we are going to have this to display with. But in case there is something, which is our or statement right here, so that means we need to also pass in. This is now where we run our transaction log right here. So we need to copy everything that is inside of this. Just cut it and then paste it inside of here. You can see how the code is going. Do not make any mistake. You need to pay very good attention here how I'm doing this code. Remember, in the future we are going to refactor this and then place it inside its own component and then just call it inside of our home. But right now, just follow along. We'll do this later on. Okay, so I paste it inside, so you can see we check for the transaction whether it is empty. If it is not, we are using the or here, and then you need to render the transaction itself if it is not empty. So let's save this code first of all. Let's save this code so that, okay, so right now you can see that it is still showing that we have something here. This is our static information that we created before. So let's quickly come over here. Let's see if we'll have an empty. Let's delete everything that we have here and save. Okay, so you can see now we don't have anything inside of our transaction log, which is exactly the way it is inside of our Firebase. So which means we're going to have this no transaction history. As you can see, this is exactly what we just created. So whenever a user launches this app for the first time, he or she will be visited with this information until they make their first transaction. They will not have any transaction history information. All right, so let's just undo this for now and then save our app again. Okay, and then now we need to pass all this information dynamically. Remember, we need to do that because that is how this stuff will work. Okay, so first of all, we start from the key right here. So we need to pass in a key, which is, okay, sorry, we need to first of all call this inside of our map function. Okay, so down here, let's call our transaction log. Now I want us to only display 4 transaction history at a time inside our home screen. So I don't want us to have more than 4. This means that if a user wants to see, like, the recent transaction is 4 recent transactions will be displayed on the home screen. If it is more than 4, we have to now click the see all to see the list of all transactions that the user has. So for that, you have to use slice here. Then we start from 0 and end with 4, and then we now use our .map operator and then call it item, and then this item we're gonna have our parentheses. So just take a look at it here, and then now we need to copy this. As I said earlier, let's cut everything and then place it inside of the slice.map. Okay, now I've placed it there, the error has gone. So as you can see, now we are now mapping through the transaction log itself, but we are only slicing it to 4. So if we have more than 4 transaction logs, which definitely any bank user will have, so it means that we only display only 4 most recent transactions, only 4 most recent here. Okay, so that's what this code is doing here. So let's continue. Now we need to pass the icons dynamically also, because remember, this icon, we have the send and receive icon. So when the user is receiving, we have this green icon here, and when they are sending, we also have another icon that is pointing towards another direction. So let's write that here. So first of all, inside of the source of our icon, we need to have our item.transaction type. If transaction type is equal to, if it is equal to receive, remember the receive that is coming from our mocked transaction data. So if it is equal to transaction, sorry, if it is equal to receive, that means we have to render another icon. So let's call it icons.receive, which is receive2. All right, let me also break it down here. So if that is true, then if that is not true, then we need to render item. We need to check for another thing, because now I want us to use multiple checks here. So if the item also is equal to, if the item.transaction type is equal to, which is a transfer, is equal to transfer, then we need to, if it is true, we need to render icons.send. All right, so come down again and say if everything fails, we just have to render icons.send, which means they are now doing the airtime transaction and we are still using the send icon. Okay, let me refactor this code a bit. Okay, so you can see this is what we have here inside of our source. Remember? So now we'll be able to render the icons dynamically based on the transaction type. Okay, so if it's receive, we have receive icon. If it is transfer, we have the transfer icon, and the transfer icon is the same with the send icon, because this is airtime. Airtime is taking, if you are buying airtime, it's taking money away from your bank. So I'm using the same icon for transfer, which also means you are removing money from your account. All right, so let's continue again. In the next phase, we have our view, which has our name. Okay, so we need to also render this dynamically. So this name, first of all, let me refactor this code a bit so you can see. It's inside of a text. Remember, it's inside of a text, and then we need to display it based on the transaction type. So first of all, I need to remove this inside the text, and then inside of here, let's call our item.transaction type, because we need to always use this transaction type to know exactly what to display. Okay, so if it is airtime, for instance, I'm just using this airtime to start. So if it is airtime, I'm going to display a message that says, because right here, as you can see, we have this that says received from the name of the person. So we need to also have a message based on the transaction type. So let's call it, we're using backtick right now, and then say send airtime to, so the person that we are sending the airtime is item.the phone number. We're just going to display the phone that the airtime is being sent to. Okay, so let me break this down again. Send airtime to phone number. So if it's not true, just take a look at how I'm doing this. Remember, this is where this code started. The item is equal to, if type is equal to airtime, if it is true, we send this code inside of a backtick, and this is where the backtick ends. So now it's now the opposite of what will happen, which is if the item dot transaction type also is equal to receive. So if it is equal to receive, that is, if it is true, let's also break it down like this. So if it is true, let's also do our backtick and say received or received from. We now have to pass in the name, which is also going to be inside of a backtick, and then call it item.name, which will now be the username. So if all this doesn't happen, so it means it is now a transfer. So in case these two checks fails, that means it is now a transfer. So all we have to now say is our backtick and say transferred to item.name. Okay, let me refactor the code a bit and then explain. Okay, so now we are able to check. Remember, all this is inside of the text, so we are checking based on what we display inside of this text. Okay, so we are saying if it is airtime, just send to the phone number. But if it is transaction type of receive, send received from. If it is transaction type of transferred, just send transfer to the name that we have here. All right, so right now we now need to focus on the date, time, and category. So let me refactor the code very well. So this is also inside of another text right here. So we need to also render this text dynamically. So, okay, so first of all, let's do the date. Let's do the date. So let me call this okay, so we need to just delete this. So as you can see, we are having an issue here because we haven't completed our code. So just remove this, and then inside of it, let's also have our item. What am I even doing? This should be inside of this. Okay, inside of this curly braces, let's have item dot date time. Okay, and inside the category, we're gonna have category will now be, let me refactor this code so that you guys can understand. Okay, so this is our category here, and then we need to check the category type, which is also going to be inside of curly braces item dot category. So right now we now have the category. Okay, let's move down. Also, let's continue with the amount. So we need to also pass the amount. Remember, this amount is also dynamic here, so each transaction will always have its own amount, so we need to also render that. So let's also come over here inside of the text, whatever that is inside of the text, let's render it. Okay, so now before we even continue with this amount, we need to also check for the color, because we have, remember in the previous time we statically typed this, we had the red, which is the sent, and then the receive, which is green right now. So now we need to dynamically render the color of the amount based on the transaction type. Okay, so we need to put this inside of a curly braces and then change the quotation to backtick, change it to backtick, and then we need to render this styling dynamically. Okay, so just remove it and then remove the p there. Okay, so inside of this, let's type our item dot transaction type as usual. So if the transaction type is equal to transfer, so if it is equal to transfer, we need to render the text that says, let me bring this down so you guys can see. So if it is transfer, we need to render the text, which is red 600, right? Okay, so let's continue. If that is true, if that is not true, sorry, item dot transaction type, if it is equal to receive, then if it is true, let me break it down also. If it is true, let's render a text that says text green minus 600. Okay, so if all this is not true, then we just have to render, okay, I think that is it. That is it. It's just two types, sent red and green. Okay, so that is it. That is it. If this, okay, so this should just be, if receive transaction type, if receive is green, if red, transaction type receive should be green, and If not so, it should be red. Okay, so yeah, it should be. If not so, we should just have a text of red by default. So which means they are now performing airtime. Okay, so now we have the code complete. So this is actually happening inside of our class name. Remember, inside of our class name, this is actually where it ends, and this is the text itself inside of the text field right here. So now we need to also render this plus or minus sign based on the transaction type. Remember that we need to also do that. So let's come over here, let's delete it. So inside of our curly braces also, let's type item dot transaction type. So if it is equal to receive, then we need to pass in plus. But if it is not, we need to pass in the minus. All right, so there should be a close curly braces here. Okay, so if the transaction type is received, so which means it is the plus sign. But if it is not, if it is sent, it means the money is going out from the account, so it's minus. If it is transfer, it is minus also. So now we need to now pass in the amount itself. So the amount has to be item dot amount, and then pass the dollar sign right here. Now the amount, we need to also convert it to local string so that we always have it well formatted. Okay, let me just carry this down a little bit. Okay, so here you have it. We now have to save our code and see if everything is working fine. But before that, let me refactor the code, and then let's save everything right now. Okay, as you can see, we have it right here, and then it says okay, the airtime definitely will not have a category. The airtime should have a category of airtime. Though I know that's not actually the case here, because we are displaying, this should be displayed, okay, send airtime to this phone number, and then the amount, because the first two is displaying properly. Which is as it should. So let's scroll up, and no, let's scroll up. Okay, transferred. So if it is airtime, send airtime to phone. If it is received, send. So I don't know why it is not aligning. It is not aligning like the rest of it. So let me see, maybe because I broke it from here. Let me refactor the code properly. I think maybe because I broke it. So let's see. I'm sorry, you have to watch me do all this. I have to be very careful what I'm doing. Okay, so I think I should have it like this. Okay, so right now I think it was based on how I was refactoring the code here. So now it is working properly. So as you can see, sent item to this number, transferred to this name, and then you can see their corresponding category is displaying based on what we pass inside our mock transaction data. All right, so if you were able to do this, congratulations, you're able to design the home page to look exactly. Why is it taking time to always load all the time? To always look like what we have inside of our Figma. So if you're able to accomplish this, congratulations to you. All right, so we have so much more to do right here, so much more. Remember, like I said, if we are now getting the information, or we are now getting these data from Firebase cloud storage, so all we have to do now is just to pass in our user data, which just, for instance, we'll just say user data, which we already have above, and also user data, and then say dot transaction, because definitely we have transaction inside user data. Then just call user data dot transaction. So automatically, in fact, if I save this right now, I think we should be having the node data. Let me save it and see. So okay, it's gonna crash. Because the chaining and everything, we need to chain and the rest of it. But anyway, you understand what I'm talking about. We just have to pass in this data like this to be able to make use of them without having to recode all this thing again. That's why we have to do this mock data, because right now we have not gone to the extent of making transaction yet with this bank. But for the testing purpose of our design, we need to use a mock data to do that as well. Okay, so, and also I'm going to give you guys an assignment. It's a very simple assignment. I want you guys to refactor this transaction log into a new component. So you have to create a new component and then call it transaction log or whatever. Just call it transaction or transaction log, and then refactor the code in a way that all we have to do here is just to call the transaction log and pass in the necessary props to it, just as we did inside the quick link here. So we need to do the same thing so that we don't have this code inside, all this code inside of our home.jss. So we just have to refactor this, and I think the code is a little bit long, so we need to just refactor it a bit. So that's the assignment I'm giving you guys. So just follow up. If you are stuck, no problem, I'm going to do this correction in our next video. So like I said, in our next video, we will also be implementing our necessary screens, because from here on, the user will start navigating, like navigating to profile, navigating to see all, being able to click this and get the transaction history will come later on after we have implemented the transaction itself completely. We're able to do the transfer screen, you understand, the quick link, we'll be able to do airtime, and the rest, all the whole screens, we'll be able to implement them in our next video. So all you have to do is subscribe to my channel, and then click notification icon and then the bell to get notified whenever I drop the video. And also, I'm also going to be passing this code to our GitHub repository so that you guys can always make use of it. In case you are stuck, you can always refer back to this code. So after this video right now, I'm going to update the repository that we have, which is this repository right here. We are going to update it. All right, so that is it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Please do the assignment. If you are stuck, feel free to ask me any question in the comment section. I always reply. Thank you very much.